Leave my store." The words ripped through the jewelry boutique like a whip across glass. They came from Catherine Moore, the manager, standing tall behind a counter lined with velvet trays and diamond rings. Her voice wasn't a whisper. It was loud enough for every customer in the showroom to hear, as if humiliation was part. Across from her stood a woman in cobalt blue. No flashy handbag, no necklace of glittering stones. Just clean lines, calm eyes, and a silence that pressed heavier than any reply. She didn't argue. She did. The store was elegant marble floors polished to a mirror, chandeliers scattering light across glass displays. But Catherine's words poisoned it. The beauty didn't shine anymore. It mocked the Mo-e-jine. Employees in navy uniforms froze. One young clerk clutched a clipboard tight against her chest. Another shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to the security camera in the corner, then back at the floor. They had all seen their manager like this before. None dared interrupt. Customers noticed, too. A silver-haired woman lowered her glasses, disbelief written across her face. A couple by the bridal rings stopped whispering. Near the entrance, a young man angled his phone, the red record light glowing like a quiet sigh. The woman in blue finally spoke. Her voice was calm, deliberate, stronger than Catherine's shout. "Are you finished?" Catherine smirked, mistaking composure for weakness. "Customers like you waste our time. You don't look like you can afford what's in this store. Security will take care of you." But the woman didn't move. She stood rooted to the polished floor, every second of silence making Catherine's fury look smaller, pettier. And before this story moves forward, let me ask you something. The insult still clung to the air, bouncing off mirrored walls and chandelier crystals, heavy and undeniable. Yet the woman in blue didn't break. She had seen this scene before. At 16, a clerk told her to try the bargain rack. At 28, a showroom attendant accused her of handing over a stolen card. Each slight had carved itself into memory. Each humiliation had become fuel. And now, here it was again, same contempt, same dismissal, same attempt to erase her existence in a single phrase. Only this time, Catherine had aimed it at the wrong woman. The tension in the store didn't end with that insult. It began there. And in just minutes, everyone in that glittering showroom, every clerk, every customer, every silent witness would learn the truth about the woman Catherine had just tried to throw out. She wasn't dressed like the woman who owned the floor beneath her feet. That was intentional. A fitted cobalt blazer, black slacks, simple heels, professional but not extravagant. No diamond necklace to catch the light. No logo purse to flash wealth. Just a leather portfolio tucked under her arm and the kind of stillness that spoke louder than fashion. Her name was Maya Richardson, 42 years old, founder and CEO of Richardson Luxe, the very company that had acquired this jewelry chain 3 years earlier. But today, she chose to walk in without her entourage, without her executive assistant, without the invisible shield of status. To the staff, she was just another customer. To Catherine Moore, she was an easy target. Maya had expected resistance. She'd seen it too many times in her life. That morning, she had parked her own car 2 blocks away, not the black SUV that usually carried her. She wanted this visit to be quiet, almost anonymous. A test. She wanted to know how her store, her investment, her brand treated someone who didn't walk in dripping with wealth. Now she had her answer. Across the boutique, employees kept sneaking glances. One clerk's lips trembled as she mouthed silently to another, "Do you think she's really a customer?" The question hung between them like a shadow. Maya didn't miss it. She never did. She had grown up decoding those whispers on playgrounds, in classrooms, later in boardrooms. At 25, she remembered sitting in a bank office with a folder of investment plans, being told her proposal was too ambitious for someone like her. At 32, she'd been mistaken for an assistant at her own negotiation table. And now, in her 40s, she was still here, still underestimated, still measured by appearances. Her chest tightened, but not with shame, with recognition, with memory, with resolve. A boy in a hoodie near the door whispered to his mother, "Why is she yelling at that lady?" The mother hushed him quickly, but her eyes stayed fixed on Maya, sympathy flickering in her gaze. Every witness could feel the tension bending the air, but none of them knew the storm that was coming. Because Maya wasn't just a customer, she wasn't just a black woman being told she didn't belong. She was the owner of every diamond in that case, every chandelier above their heads, every pay stub in the back office. And in a few short minutes, the people judging her by her blazer and quiet tone would discover the cost of their assumptions. But for now, she stood still, not revealing, not defending, just waiting. Because silence, she had learned, is the sharpest weapon when the world expects you to scream. Catherine didn't lower her voice. She raised it, letting the words ricochet off glass and marble. You're wasting our time. This is a luxury store, not a window shopping playground. Her tone was sharp, but her smirk was sharper. She leaned across the counter as if proximity would crush dignity. The employees behind her stiffened. One fiddled nervously with the clasp on a velvet display case, the tiny click echoing like a heartbeat. Maya didn't answer. Not yet. Her calm made the silence heavier, and Catherine mistook it for weakness. That mistake was fuel. "Security!" Catherine barked, waving her hand toward the back of the boutique. "Get her out before she embarrasses herself further." No one moved. The clerks exchanged looks, unsure. A junior employee, barely mid-20s, cheeks flushed, took half a step forward. Maybe we should check the system again, Miss Moore." She said her name was... "Quiet," Catherine snapped, slicing the air with a glare. "I don't need advice from trainees." The young woman shrank back, her lips pressing into silence, but her eyes lingered on Maya with something that looked like apology. The tension didn't stop there. A man in a tailored gray suit, browsing near the watches, chuckled loud enough to be heard. "She clearly doesn't belong here. Look at her, no jewelry, no bag. Probably trying to sell knockoffs." A few customers shifted uncomfortably. One woman gasped softly, covering her mouth. The man by the door kept filming, the red light steady now, recording every word, every insult. Maya stayed still. Her eyes moved slowly from Catherine to the chuckling customer, then back again. She didn't speak. The restraint wasn't silence, it was control, and the room could feel it. Catherine, drunk on her own authority, pushed harder. She snatched a paper from Maya's portfolio, an invoice, and held it up for the crowd. "This?" she scoffed, waving it like trash. "Fake. People like you always bring paperwork that doesn't match." Then, with a swift motion, she tore it in half. The sound was small, but the insult was enormous. She dropped the pieces on the polished counter like evidence of her power. A hush fell over the store. The young clerk who had spoken earlier gasped. "You can't just..." She stopped herself, eyes darting back to Catherine, then to Maya, torn between fear and conscience. Catherine leaned in close, her perfume sharp, her tone venomous. "Do yourself a favor. Walk out before this gets worse." But Maya didn't walk. She didn't flinch. She stood as if rooted to the marble itself. Her calm was no longer quiet, it was confrontational, a mirror reflecting every ounce of Catherine's contempt back onto her. And the onlookers felt it. The silver-haired woman by the bridle rings whispered to no one in particular. "This isn't right." The young man filming muttered under his breath. "Keep talking. The world needs to see this." The tension had crossed a line. This was no longer just an argument in a jewelry store. It was a stage, and every insult was a spotlight. Catherine thought she was in control, but the truth was already shifting, quietly, in Maya's favor. And soon, the escalation Catherine had demanded would ignite something she could never contain. The torn invoice fluttered to the floor like ash from a fire. Catherine smirked, convinced the silence meant victory. But it wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Maya didn't bend to pick up the paper. She didn't lunge. She didn't even blink. She simply placed her leather portfolio back under her arm and clasped her hands in front of her. Calm, unshaken. The stillness in her posture contrasted so sharply with Catherine's frantic energy that it shifted the balance in the room. "You hear me?" Catherine pressed, her voice cutting sharp. "This is my store, and in my store I decide who gets service." Maya tilted her head slightly, studying her not as a woman confronting an authority figure, but as a leader observing someone sealing their own fate. She exhaled once, steady and low, and the sound alone made the silence heavier. One of the clerks, nervous, young, lips trembling, whispered to the colleague beside her, "She's not reacting." The other whispered back, "That's what's scary." Their eyes flicked between the manager and Maya, realization creeping into their faces. A hush fell deeper over the boutique. Even the chandeliers seemed to hang lower, the light softer, as if the room itself waited for the next move. The man in the gray suit scoffed again, trying to fill the silence. What kind of real customer just stands there? If she belonged, she'd prove it already. Maya didn't turn toward him. She didn't need to. Her silence was answer enough. For her, it wasn't the first time she had faced this test. At 19, she had walked into a career fair in Atlanta, dressed in her best thrift store blazer, resume in hand. A recruiter looked at her name, then at her face, and said, "This isn't for you." She had walked out without a word, but she remembered. At 31, when she pitched her first expansion deal, an investor called her ambitious for someone of her background. She had nodded, smiled, and signed with another firm. She remembered that too. Now, in her own jewelry store, she remembered again. The sting was real, but so was the lesson. Silence has weight. And sometimes, silence is the loudest response. Catherine grew impatient. "Security!" she barked again, her heels striking against the marble as she stormed toward the back office. "I want her out now!" Still, Maya didn't move. Her shoulders stayed square, her hands folded, her gaze steady. That composure radiated something the others in the room could feel: control. The young clerk's voice shook as she spoke, barely above a whisper. "She's not afraid." The silver-haired customer crossed her arms, her face hardening. The man filming zoomed in closer. And for the first time since the shouting began, the energy in the room tilted not toward Catherine's authority, but toward Maya's calm. Catherine didn't realize it yet, but every second Maya stayed silent, the ground beneath her manager's power was eroding. And when Maya finally chose to speak, the silence would make her words cut deeper than any insult ever could. The store had gone from glittering showroom to silent courtroom. Every breath felt recorded. Every glance carried weight. And then, the witnesses began to act. The young man by the entrance steadied his phone, the red light glowing brighter now. He angled it toward Catherine's stiff posture, her raised voice, and Maya's unshaken calm. Under his breath, he whispered, "The world needs to see this." A silver-haired woman near the bridal rings finally spoke. "Excuse me," she said, voice steady but cold, "but this is outrageous. She's done nothing wrong." Her words sliced through the tension. A ripple spread. Customers who had been frozen in discomfort now shifted, murmuring, whispering, exchanging looks that said, "This isn't right." Catherine spun toward the woman, her face tightening. "This is none of your concern. Please continue your shopping." But the dismissal only deepened the unease. At the counter, the junior clerk, the one Catherine had silenced earlier, couldn't stay quiet anymore. Her hands trembled as she placed a velvet tray back on the glass. "Miss Moore," she said softly. "I saw her paperwork. It looked real. Maybe—" "Enough," Catherine barked, cutting her off. The young clerk flinched, eyes dropping to the floor, but she didn't retreat all the way. She stayed standing, her chest rising with a silent courage she hadn't felt before. In the back corner, another customer, mid-30s, Latina, with a stroller beside her, pulled out her phone, too. She began typing, then whispered to the woman next to her, "I'm posting this. People need to know how they treat customers here." The atmosphere shifted. The quiet was no longer compliance. It was pressure, gathering like a storm cloud. Maya stood in the center of it, unmoving. Her silence became the axis around which the room spun. She didn't need to ask for help. The witnesses had decided for themselves. Catherine's jaw clenched. She could feel the weight of eyes, the hum of recording phones. Still, she doubled down. "You think an audience changes the rules? Security will be here any second, and when they arrive, you'll be gone." The gray-suited man near the watches laughed again, trying to restore the hierarchy. "Yeah, film all you want. She'll be out of here before that video even uploads." His voice was smug, but his eyes flicked nervously at the growing number of cameras. Maya finally turned her gaze toward him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The look alone froze him, the kind of steady look that made arrogance wilt. He shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his tie, his smirk slipping. The silver-haired woman crossed her arms tighter. "I don't think she's the one who should be leaving." The young clerk whispered again, this time louder, her voice trembling but clear. "She hasn't raised her voice once. Why are we treating her like this?" It was the beginning of something Catherine couldn't control. The narrative was slipping. The crowd wasn't just watching, they were judging, recording, aligning. And with every phone lifted, every whisper spoken, Maya's silence grew louder. The witnesses were no longer passive. They were part of the story now. Catherine had wanted an audience to see her authority. Instead, she had given Maya a stage. The air inside the boutique was no longer elegant, it was electric, humming with tension. Every second of silence weighed heavier. Every whisper from the crowd carried sharper judgment, and Catherine Moore could feel her authority slipping through her fingers. So she did what people like her always did. When control cracked, she doubled down. "You think your little audience matters?" Catherine sneered, her voice pitched higher, brittle with anger. "This store doesn't serve people who walk in pretending to be something they're not." She jabbed a finger toward Maya, each word louder than the last. "You're a fraud. And I don't tolerate frauds." Gasps rippled through the room. Phones tilted higher. A mother pulled her daughter closer, whispering, "Keep recording." The young clerk at the counter winced. "Miss Moore, please, maybe we should—" "Stop talking!" Catherine snapped, the bite in her tone making the girl's face flush red. "If you want to keep your job, you'll stay out of this." She turned back to Maya, eyes blazing. "Security!" Her voice cracked across the marble like a whip. "Now!" From the back hallway, two guards emerged, broad-shouldered, black uniforms, radios clipped to their belts. They didn't move quickly, but their presence made the air thicker. Customers stepped aside instinctively, their murmurs rising into a low buzz. "Escort her out," Catherine ordered, pointing dramatically as though staging a performance. "She doesn't belong in here." The guards hesitated. They glanced at Maya, poised, silent, composed, then at the cluster of raised phones filming every angle. The hesitation was small, but the crowd noticed. "She hasn't done anything," the silver-haired woman said firmly, her voice carrying. "You can't just throw someone out." Catherine's face reddened. "Ma'am, this is my store, and I decide who belongs." But the words rang hollow. Even the guards shifted uncomfortably, one scratching at his collar, the other muttering under his breath, "This doesn't feel right." The man in the gray suit chuckled again, though less confident now. "What are you waiting for? She's wasting everyone's time." But no one laughed with him. The chuckle fell flat, swallowed by the weight of disapproval around him. Maya's stillness became its own defiance. She hadn't raised her voice once, but her presence now dwarfed Catherine's fury. Her silence wasn't submission, it was judgment, letting the others measure the ugliness of the moment themselves. The junior clerk's voice shook as she spoke again, louder this time. "She gave her name. She showed her paperwork. I saw it. She's telling the truth." Her courage drew nods from two customers nearby, one muttering, "Exactly," another whispering, "I saw too." Catherine's glare snapped toward her. "You're finished. Don't come in tomorrow." The words landed heavy. The clerk gasped, but before she could answer, Maya's eyes shifted to her calm, steady, almost protective. That look said more than words. "You are not alone." The crowd felt it too. Phones tilted higher. Whispers turned sharper. The murmurs weren't just commentary anymore, they were judgment, and they weren't falling on Maya. Catherine had wanted this moment to prove her control. Instead, she had placed herself under the harshest spotlight of all, and the storm she had summoned was about to break. The two guards hovered near the counter, their hesitation obvious. The crowd was restless now, phones lifted, whispers louder, sympathy gravitating toward the silent woman in cobalt blue, and Catherine Moore knew it. She could feel her grip loosening. Her authority had slipped into the cracks of uncertainty, so she lashed out. "You want proof?" Catherine hissed, reaching across the glass display. She snatched Maya's black card from the counter where it had been placed earlier, holding it up between two fingers as if it were diseased. "This is fake, a prop. I've seen scams like this 100 times." The crowd erupted in murmurs. The silver-haired woman gasped audibly. The junior clerk's hands flew to her mouth. "You can't take her property," someone shouted from the back. Catherine ignored it. She turned to one of the guards and shoved the card into his chest. "Lock it up. Safe in the back. This will never work here." The guard hesitated, his eyes flicking from the sleek card to Maya's calm face. But Catherine's glare bore down like a commandment. Reluctantly, he slipped the card into a pouch on his belt. "That's theft," the silver-haired woman snapped, her voice rising now with fury. "You just stole from her in front of everyone." Phones zoomed closer, recording the moment from every angle. The young man by the door muttered into his camera, "This is insane." She gave them her card and ID, and now they're confiscating it. This is robbery in broad daylight. Maya didn't move. Her shoulders stayed square, her gaze steady. But her silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. Catherine mistook it again. She leaned in, close enough for the venom in her voice to cut sharper. "People like you don't walk into stores like this. You think dressing up makes you belong? You don't. Not here. Not anywhere." The words hit like stones, brutal and public. Customers gasped. One woman near the strollers shook her head, whispering, "I can't believe I'm hearing this." The junior clerk finally stepped out from behind the counter, voice trembling but resolute. "That's enough. Her paperwork was valid. Her name was in the system. I saw it." "Silence," Catherine roared. Her face was red now, fury blotching her skin. "One more word and you're gone for good." But the words no longer landed. They hung awkwardly in the air, swallowed by the growing presence of phones, by the visible disgust on customers' faces, by the shifting hesitation in the guard's eyes. Maya remained still. Her silence was not retreat. It was anticipation. She had endured the insult, the dismissal, the theft of her card. And now, with every camera watching, with every witness recording, Catherine Moore had just crossed the final line. The boutique was no longer Catherine's stage. It was Maya's. And in that moment, the entire store stood on the edge of revelation. The card was gone, slipped into the guard's pouch. The torn invoice still littered the counter. And Catherine Moore stood tall, convinced she had delivered the final blow. But Maya Richardson didn't move. She let the silence hang for another beat, long enough for everyone to feel the weight of what had just happened. Then, with slow precision, she reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out her phone. No sudden gestures, no raised voice, just one quiet tap on the screen. On the other end, in a corporate office less than a mile away, a headset clicked. "Yes, Miss Richardson?" The voice was calm, professional, unmistakably efficient. Maya's own tone matched it, measured, even but deliberate enough to slice through the room. "Document this moment. Time. Stamp it. Initiate protocol." A pause. Then the voice replied, "Understood. System is live. Video feed syncing." The crowd shifted. The silver-haired woman leaned closer to hear. The young man filming mouthed the words "protocol" to his camera. Even the guards glanced at each other, unsettled. Catherine scoffed. "What are you doing? Calling for backup? You think a phone is going to save you?" She barked a laugh, brittle, high-pitched. "This is pathetic." Maya ignored her. Her eyes didn't leave the clerk who had spoken earlier, the one who risked her job to defend her. Maya gave her the smallest nod, a silent acknowledgement, a promise. The clerk's lips trembled, but her shoulders squared just a little more. "Miss Richardson," the voice in the phone continued, "do you want escalation protocols activated now?" "Not yet," Maya said, her voice steady. "Stay on standby." The silence that followed was thicker than before. Customers exchanged glances, unsure. Catherine's sneer faltered for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. "You're bluffing," she spat. "Calling some friend to pretend you matter. It won't work. Not here." But her words no longer landed. The energy in the boutique was shifting. For the first time, customers weren't watching Maya as a target. They were watching her as if she were something else entirely. Someone in control. The guard holding the card spoke, uncertain. "Ma'am, maybe we should give this back." "Don't you dare," Catherine snapped, spinning toward him. "You follow my orders, not hers." The contradiction hung heavy. If Catherine truly owned her authority, why did her tone sound like panic? Why did her eyes dart, searching for control that kept slipping? Maya raised her phone slightly, not as a threat, but as a signal. Her voice was calm, deliberate, final. "Every second you continue, every word you say, it's being logged. This will not disappear." The crowd stiffened. The silver-haired woman nodded firmly. The young man filming whispered, "She knows something. She's not just another customer." And for the first time since the shouting began, Catherine Moore hesitated, just long enough for everyone to see it. Maya didn't need to raise her voice. The protocol was already in motion. The storm had already begun. The tension was a live wire, stretched tight across the boutique. Catherine Moore stood rigid, face flushed, trying to mask the flicker of doubt that had crossed her eyes. The guards lingered uneasily, caught between their manager's orders and the quiet gravity of the woman in cobalt blue. Customers leaned forward, phones raised, whispers rising like a tide. And then Maya spoke. Her tone was calm, but every syllable landed like a verdict. "You've made a mistake," she said, steady and deliberate. "Not just an insult, not just theft. You've humiliated the one person in this room you should never have touched." Catherine barked a laugh, brittle and forced. "And who's that supposed to be? Some influencer? A lawyer? Please." Maya's gaze didn't shift. Her silence stretched until the room leaned into it, waiting. Then she spoke the words that changed everything. "I'm not your customer," she said evenly. "I'm your employer." The boutique froze. Maya let the words sink in before continuing. "My name is Maya Richardson, founder and CEO of Richardson Luxe, the parent company that owns this chain, this boutique, and every paycheck behind that counter." "Oh." Gasps cut through the air like glass breaking. The silver-haired woman's hand flew to her mouth. The young man filming whispered into his phone, "She owns the place. Oh my God, she owns it." The junior clerk stared, eyes wide, the realization dawning fast and heavy. She had defended the very woman who signed her paychecks. But Catherine, her face drained, lips trembling, shook her head. "No, no, that's not possible. You're lying. If you were the owner, you wouldn't walk in here looking like... She didn't finish. The words collapsed under their own weight. Maya stepped forward, slow and measured. Her heels clicked against the marble, each step heavier than Catherine's shouting had ever been. "Looking like what?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "Like I don't belong? Like dignity needs diamonds to be real?" The crowd was silent. Phones recorded every frame. Maya stopped at the counter, directly across from Catherine, and placed her phone gently on the glass. The call was still open. The voice on the other end spoke, loud enough for all to hear. "Confirmation received. Miss Richardson is live. Ownership verified." The last thread snapped. Catherine's composure shattered. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Maya straightened, her presence filling the room. "You've insulted me. You've stolen from me. And you've exposed yourself in front of every witness here. This will not be undone." The crowd erupted in whispers, disbelief mixing with satisfaction. The guards stepped back instinctively, suddenly aware they had been standing on the wrong side of power. The junior clerk exhaled, relief softening her shoulders. Catherine, pale and trembling, tried to salvage control. You should have said something sooner." But Maya cut her off with one sentence, crisp as a blade. "I don't explain myself to employees who forget who they work for." And just like that, the balance of the room flipped. Catherine no longer towered. She shrank, cornered by the truth she couldn't erase. Maya Richardson had revealed who she was, and the revelation was irreversible. The words, "I'm your employee," still rang in the air, heavier than any shout, louder than any and then the cracks appeared. The junior clerk was the first to react. She let out a gasp that turned into a nervous laugh, half relief, half awe. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered, clutching the counter for balance. "I should have spoken sooner." Her eyes shimmered not with fear, but with gratitude. Gratitude that the calm woman she had tried to defend was the very leader who could protect H. The guards exchanged looks, panic flickering across their faces. One shifted his weight, muttering under his breath, "We just took the owner's card." The other swallowed hard, his hand brushing the pouch on his belt, as if the object inside had suddenly turned radioactive. Their authority had flipped into liability in an instant. Customers erupted into whispers, phones rising higher. The young man by the door grinned into his camera. "You're watching this live," he said breathlessly. "The woman they tried to throw out owns the entire chain. This is history." Comments began to flood his live stream. He scrolled quickly, his eyes widening at the flood of shocked emojis and furious demands for accountability. The silver-haired woman didn't whisper. She spoke loud and clear, her voice carrying across the boutique. "You humiliated her, and she owns this place. Shame on you." Heads nodded in agreement. A murmur of "disgusting," "unbelievable," "fire them all," spread like wildfire through the crowd. And Catherine Moore? She crumbled. The manager who had once filled the air with contempt now looked pale, her hands trembling on the counter. Her eyes darted from Maya to the phones, to the guards, to her own staff. This can't," she stammered. She walked in here like what?" The silver-haired woman snapped back, her tone sharper than a diamond edge. "Like a human being?" The words drew a gasp, then applause from a corner of the boutique. Customers who had been silent now clapped lightly, some shaking their heads, others recording with wide, unblinking eyes. The gray-suited man, once so smug, suddenly found his smirk gone. He adjusted his tie, stepping back from the spotlight. I didn't know," he mumbled, his voice swallowed by the rising tide of disapproval. Behind the counter, two clerks whispered furiously to each other. "Did you know?" She's the CEO? No, Catherine never said. Oh my God, we've been insulting the owner. Their panic was raw, written across their faces like open confession. The boutique was no longer Catherine's domain. It belonged to Maya and to the truth. And every person in the room, employee, guard, customer, felt the shift like gravity pulling them to one side. Phones flashed, whispers sharpened, judgment solidified. Catherine Moore's authority had evaporated, and in its place, a storm of accountability gathered, ready to break. The boutique buzzed with whispers. Phones lifted like lanterns, capturing every flicker of truth. Catherine Moore stood paralyzed, her authority dissolved, her arrogance stripped bare. The guards hovered uselessly, their radios silent, their eyes avoiding contact. The junior clerk's breath shook, her conscience battling fear, but relief glimmered, knowing the tide had turned. Maya Richardson didn't need to shout. She simply picked up her phone from the glass counter and spoke into it, her voice calm and deliberate. "Carla," she said evenly, "initiate immediate termination for Catherine Moore, store manager. Revoke her credentials. Effective now." A crisp voice answered on the line, echoing through the boutique loud enough for all to hear. "Understood. Credentials revoked. System updated." At that moment, Catherine's ID badge, still clipped to her blazer, buzzed faintly, the light blinking red. The guards both noticed. So did the clerks. A ripple of gasps spread across the boutique. It was final, irreversible. Catherine's face drained. She clawed at the badge as if it had betrayed her. You can't do this in front of customers. This isn't—" Maya's gaze cut her short. "You thought humiliation was your tool. Now you get to feel it yourself. In the same room, in front of the same people." The silver-haired woman clapped once, sharp and loud. Others joined, a murmur of approval swelling into applause. Phones shook slightly as people recorded, their disbelief giving way to exhilaration. Maya turned to the guards. "Return my card, now." The older of the two hesitated only a second before reaching into his pouch and placing the sleek black card back onto the counter with trembling hands. We didn't know," he stammered. "You knew enough to follow an order without question," Maya replied, her voice steady. "That's how injustice survives. Consider this your warning." The guard nodded quickly, his face flushed with shame. Maya shifted her attention to the junior clerk. "You," she said softly. The girl froze, eyes wide. "You spoke when it mattered. That won't be forgotten." Relief flooded the clerk's face, her lips parting as if to thank her, but no words came. She just nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. Finally, Maya returned her focus to Catherine, who stood shaking, her bravado completely gone. "You tore up documents. You stole from me. And worst of all, you believed your bias was policy. That ends today." Catherine tried to form words, but her voice collapsed into silence. Maya raised her phone once more. "Carla, mark this store for full staff review. Every incident, every complaint. Begin audit tonight." "Yes, Miss Richardson," Carla's voice confirmed. The crowd erupted again, some clapping, some cheering softly, others simply shaking their heads in awe. The young man by the door grinned into his live stream. "You saw it here. She fired the manager on the spot. Justice live." Maya let the applause swell, then raised a hand. The room quieted, the silence now hers to command. "Power isn't about who can shout the loudest," she said, her voice even but resonant. "It's about who can act with finality, and this is final." Phones captured the moment, but no recording could outmatch the truth etched into every witness. Catherine Moore's reign had ended. Maya Richardson's authority was absolute. The boutique no longer felt like a store. It felt like a stage where justice had just been performed in real time. The chandeliers glittered overhead, reflecting the glow of 100 phone screens capturing history. Catherine Moore stood small, now silent, pale, her badge blinking red like a scarlet letter. Maya Richardson remained centered, composed, the axis of the entire room. She slid her card back into her portfolio, not a gesture of wealth, but of closure. Then she lifted her gaze and let it travel slowly across the crowd, customers, clerks, guards, all of them waiting for the final word. Her voice was steady, carrying like a bell. "You thought silence was weakness," she said. "You mistook composure for submission. That was your last mistake." The line cut through the boutique, sharp as a diamond edge. People exhaled audibly, murmurs breaking into scattered applause. The young man filming whispered into his phone. That's the line. That's the moment. Maya didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her expression remained calm, solemn, dignified. She turned slightly, addressing not just Catherine but everyone who had watched in silence until it was safe to speak. Humiliation doesn't make you powerful. Shouting doesn't make you right. And prejudice, she paused, letting the weight of the word settle, has no place in a business I built. The silver-haired woman nodded firmly, her eyes shining. The junior clerk straightened her shoulders, pride blooming where fear had lived moments before. Even the guards lowered their heads, shame pulling at their posture. Maya let the silence hang, then spoke her final words, crisp as a verdict. I don't need to film this moment. I am the result of every moment like this, and I am the last person you'll ever underestimate. Applause erupted, not polite, but visceral, a release of all the tension that had filled the boutique. Phones shook as customers captured the drop the mic ending. The live stream chat exploded with fire emojis, words like justice, queen, power. Catherine backed away, shrinking, swallowed by the sound of her own downfall. No one reached for her. No one defended her. The authority she had clung to had vanished, stripped bare in front of witnesses who would never forget. Maya gathered her portfolio, gave one last nod to the junior clerk, and turned toward the exit. Each step echoed with the finality of justice delivered. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. The room itself parted for her, reverent, respectful, transformed. The story didn't end with Catherine's humiliation. It ended with Maya's truth. A truth every witness carried out with them. A truth that would ripple through every phone screen and conversation long after the doors closed. And as she pushed open the glass door, the words lingered in the air like an inscription carved into stone. Power isn't loud. Power is final.